Nā reira, morena, kia koutou katoa. So good morning. Thank you, Vicky. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning to share with you an update on the Sustainable Finance Forum. So as with all things, there is never a free lunch, so even in these fabulous surroundings. So in the second half of this session, I will be joined by my good friend Pip, from EY, who will facilitate a session with you all to capture some of your perspectives on the role and drivers of sustainable financing in New Zealand. So, hold on, I'll just make sure I get this thing working. Who are we? Well, the forum brings together a number of key players across the New Zealand financial system. People from banks, funds management, insurance, intermediaries, corporates, NGOs and academia, all tasked with collectively delivering a sustainable finance roadmap. A roadmap that will help New Zealand's financial system shift from one that has been largely agnostic to sustainable impact to one that is driving or creates benefit for stakeholders through its support of social, environmental and economic well-being outcomes. Now, in doing this, New Zealand is following on from similar programs of work that have already been undertaken in other jurisdictions, including the EU, Canada and China, and therefore we have the benefit of taking learnings from those from others, and we also have the ability to build on frameworks already available, such as the UN-sponsored Principles for Responsible Investment and Banking. So what is a sustainable financial system? So it is, first of all, a system that intentionally plays a role in supporting transition to a low emissions, resource efficient, just and inclusive economy. It's a system where long-term well-being is incorporated into decision making in an informed and transparent manner. It's one that has society's trust and confidence, with participants who understand the system's purpose and their roles and responsibilities within it. And it's a system that's able to demonstrate greater resilience and agility through the incorporation of social, environmental and economic risks and opportunities, and importantly then aligns capital accordingly. So how is financial capital allocated in New Zealand today when we consider sustainable financing? Well, the first thing I'd say is there is no comprehensive assessment of total capital allocation in New Zealand to sustainable development today. What have we got up? Okay. Oh, sorry, I was supposed to click a few times there. We do know that a gradual shift is beginning to occur globally, but as a collective, we remain behind the rest of the world when it comes to the application of investment into assets that offer true sustainable benefit. Australasia contributes approximately 2% of global responsible investment. New Zealand is less than 10% of that 2%. The good news is that a reasonably significant proportion of New Zealand's assets under management are managed under an ESG decision-making framework and or are selectively screened for negative impacts. And if you think about some of the changes that we've seen over the last 12 to 18 months, the avoidance of tobacco and munitions investments are two of the more recent examples here in New Zealand. But of the 188 billion pool of responsible investment, only 800 million, or less than 0.5%, is contributed from impact or sustainability investing. So what that means is, despite the increase we've seen in impact and community investment over the past 12 months, responsible investment in New Zealand today could be described largely as one that selectively seeks to avoid harm, and I emphasise this selectively. So no tobacco, munitions or whaling is the general standard, rather than investment which is intentionally undertaken to create sustainable benefit. We turn to banking. Transparent, sustainable lending is also yet to gain any real traction within the banking sector, with only 1.6 billion disclosed publicly today. Again, we know that the 4 major banks in New Zealand incorporate ESG frameworks in their assessment of risk, but only one to date has set public targets for intentional sustainable lending, and in that case for climate solutions, with transparent and audited reporting against those targets. If we look at the debt capital markets in New Zealand, sustainable and green bond issuance targeted to the development of sustainable assets in New Zealand has gained traction in the past 12 months, with 5 corporate and 1 bank issue completed. Again, this represents a tiny proportion of total New Zealand dollar bond issuance, both domestically and globally. So how do we change this? So the technical working groups within the forum have used the theory of change process to establish a working thesis on what the priority focus areas are to enable impactful change in the way that capital is allocated. So they've thought about what the outputs are, what the influences are, and some of the activities that happen in the system today, and how does that generate the outcomes that we actually see today, and that helps you to start refine the things you need to focus on in order to create a sustainable shift in the way capital is allocated. These have been subsequently validated by a desktop review of international literature, including the work that has already been undertaken in Canada and the EU in particular, and now form the basis of deeper investigation work that the groups are undertaking. And there are 5 areas that they're focusing on. Data and reporting is the first one. So how do we improve the quality and accessibility of data required to understand and mitigate challenges associated with social and environmental issues? How do we improve consistency and transparency of reporting of the risk associated with these issues and the mitigating actions that people take in order to address those issues? If we think about awareness and education, how do we improve awareness and understanding of the issues and opportunities and educate all system stakeholders, so users, providers, intermediaries, influencers on what these are? Governance and incentives. So is there a need, and how would you create stronger links between pricing and performance and achieving long-term outcomes and overcome the short-term bias that we currently see today? What policy and regulatory levers are required if you want to reorient where capital actually goes to? So should incentives be created for environmental and social outcomes? We've a consultation paper that's been put out today by the government on the use of EVs. Should financial advice be required to consider ethics and sustainability? Would it be appropriate to incorporate long-term sustainability focus into the role of the regulators? What would that look like? What role does policy and legislation play in supporting and driving regenerative and ethical behaviour within the system? And then lastly, what tools and structures are required to improve access to the financial system for all parts of society? Because there is no doubt that there is unequal access today here in New Zealand. So that is the 5th area that we're putting focus on. So what does all that work lead to? Well, by the 30th of September, and believe me, that's not very far away, and we have minor heart palpitations when we think about it, we are tasked with delivering an interim report that sets out the scale and dimensions of the challenges and opportunities that a shift in the broader financial system presents. One that explores the way that the current financial policy and legislation, frameworks, market rules, corporate governance practice, data access, plus education and awareness all impact on capital allocation, product development and system participant behaviours. One that makes an initial draft of set of recommendations on policy and legislative changes that might subsequently be required, and highlights instances of global best practice that may be transferable to the New Zealand environment. The audience for the report includes both the private sector and the government, and is designed to create an opportunity for further engagement with a broader set of stakeholders, and that's all to support the development of a more comprehensive final report by mid-2020. Now, that final report is expected to include a concrete set of recommendations as it relates to policy, regulatory and other implementable solutions, and then a roadmap document that outlines how and when each recommendation could be implemented, including clear roles, responsibilities, prioritisation and sequencing. Easy really, isn't it? So that's all I was going to say about the Sustainable Finance Forum and where we've actually got to, which is we are deep in the work of creating that interim report and unpeeling the onion layers to try to get to what are the real root causes and how can we actually truly affect change. What we wanted to do was now have Pip come up and facilitate a session because we want to get your views. Part of the engagement process for us is using questionnaires and using forums like this to create broader discussion and get a broader suite of views on this. The interim report will then offer another opportunity, as I say, before we head into the delivery of the final report. So, Pip, I'll hand over to you.